6 years ago I built this, the ultimate miter saw station. But as it turns out, it wasn't really the ultimate one. So now I want to build a new and better one, but the problem is I don't want to spend a whole lot of money on it. So in this video I'm going to try to build a highly functional, good looking, modular miter saw station, and according to my calculations, I'm going to be able to do it for under $500. The biggest expense of this build is definitely the plywood. Regular plywood here in Norway will cost around $70 to $80 per sheet, which I know is already cheaper than most places in the US. So the plywood I'm using is called like package boards or shipping boards here in Norway. I think they're normally used for making shipping boxes. They cost around $15 to $20 and they are sold as defective products. They have a few marks and stains, but I know from experience that if you give them some sanding, they can look really, really good. I needed a total of 18 sheets, which brought the expenses so far up to $378. I started by cutting all the parts that I needed for the cabinets, and I did this mostly using my track saw, but also the table saw. Sorting out which parts need to be cut where in order to get the most out of the plywood can be a pain in the butt, but I had made some cut charts beforehand, which made all of this a lot easier. Next day, I woke up. It was a beautiful snowy morning here in Norway, and I sat there drinking coffee in silence, looking out the window, when I thought to myself, you know what, Mr. Baloni? This is a perfect day to screw up this project. But before I did that, I cut some strips that the drawers could slide on inside of the cabinets. These would be the drawer slides. I needed 10 on each side in all of the 5 big cabinets that I was building. So in total, I had to cut 100 strips, and I used 9mm plywood for this. Or so I thought, at least. Now, this miter saw station is heavily inspired by Dennis from HookedOnWood and Drew from Wittworks. The drawer system I'm going to use is the exact same as both of them have used for their shop cabinets, and I highly recommend checking out both of their channels. I'm sure there are a lot more people who have used the same system. It's a modular system and it's pretty genius, and it's very cheap since I'm not gonna buy any drawer slides for this miter saw station. The part of the drawer that will slide on these strips is the drawer bottom. These are 9mm thick, and so I needed to have a 10mm space between the strips. In order to make this repeatable, I made a pretty simple jig with some distance blocks that set the space between each strip, but also the distance from the strip to the front edge of the cabinet. I fastened these using some brad nails, and I made sure to use plenty of them. For cabinets, I don't really think it's necessary to have full sheets of plywood on all the sides, the back, and the top and the bottom. So instead, I just used 5 15cm boards for stretchers, and this will be more than strong enough. Here I am just routing some grooves for shelves in this small cabinet. Now at this point I had already made the mistake. Unfortunately though, I didn't notice this until the next day after I had made all of the 28 drawers. So the next day I started cutting all of the parts for the drawers, and now I'll explain why I think this system is so genius. So the strips in the cabinets aka the homemade drawer slides, are all starting at every 80mm. The drawers are in 3 sizes: 80mm, 160mm, and 240mm. This means that the drawers can be switched around however you like. So if you have 3 slots, you could have 1 big drawer there, or you could have 1 medium and 1 small, or 3 small ones. And if you use the same system on all drawers and cabinets in the shop, which is what I plan on doing, you can easily switch them around. Now, I decided to make 28 drawers, so I needed a total of 112 drawer sides and fronts and backs. Once again, I used the cut chart, and by the way, if you want to build this modular station yourself, I have made some woodworking plans for it. This is a 70-page PDF with all the cut charts, material list, and detailed step-by-step instructions for building this modular station. So these and many other plans are available on baloni.com. Now, to make things easier for me when assembling the drawer, I made 2 simple fences that made up a 90-degree corner. Once again, I just used some brad nails as there won't really be a lot of weight on the drawer sides. The weight will be directed to the drawer bottom. The drawer bottoms are made from 9mm plywood. MDF might slide a little bit better, but the plywood works great as well. I love using the track saw for these cuts, as my DeWalt table saw can't really cut that wide. Also, a lot of these cuts are exactly the same, so you can just stack several sheets of plywood on top of each other, and it makes the cutting a whole lot faster. These drawer bottoms are super simple to assemble. I used a piece of 9mm plywood to get the right overhang and fastened using some brad nails. And of course, the drawer frames are a little bit lower than the drawer fronts. And this is where I discovered the mistake I had made. Some of the drawers wouldn't fit. This stressed me out a bit, and it took me some time to figure out why. I thought maybe the drawers were too big or that the stretchers of the cabinets were too short, but that wasn't it. The problem was the plywood. I just assumed that they were 9mm when actually some of them were 9.5. That doesn't sound like much, but it was enough that some of the drawers wouldn't slide smoothly at all. Luckily, this was a pretty simple fix because I just added some small wooden shims that made the cabinets a little bit wider, and you can't really see the shims. The next step now was to remove the old miter saw station, and to be perfectly honest, even though I've had this for a few years, this wasn't very sad. I was just excited to get the new one up and running. And by the way, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and put on the bell notifications so that you don't miss out on the next one. Next up, I installed the toe kick, and I made this pretty simple. I just leveled it up using some wooden shims and wedges, and I started installing the cabinet, and then I put in the drawers. Now again, the goal here is to make this as cheap as possible. So for the bench tops, I'm doing it simple. No fancy material, no expensive formica, just a double layer of good old defected plywood that I'll finish with Osmo top oil. And since I'm a freak in the sheets of plywood, I used 2 halves on the first layer, and this saved me 1 sheet of plywood. Now for the shelf for the miter saw, I built a simple frame of plywood and used plywood as the top.
What a shocker.
To set the height of the shelf, I just measured the miter saw table, subtracted 12 millimeters for the plywood top, and I added 1 millimeter. I added 1 because it's easier to add a small shim or washer under the saw if the shelf is too low than to lower the saw afterwards. Under the miter saw shelf, I wanted to have some cabinet doors to cover the dust extractor and other things. And of course, I didn't spend any money on handles. I just drilled a simple hole, which I think looks pretty good, to be honest. The cabinet door hinges are the only hardware on this entire miter station, and since I'm using only 12mm plywood, I had to be careful not to protrude the front. So I used a chisel until the holes were deep enough for the hinges. The hinges cost $8 for a pack of 2, so let's add $16 to the total cost. There are a few ways to install these doors. I just put some blocks of wood on the floor until I had the right height and screwed the hinges in place where they were. This was pretty simple, and you also have some room for adjustment in the hinges to get the height and the gaps perfect. I had one of these magnet locks laying around, and I added it on the bottom of the left cabinet door since this was the only corner that didn't close properly. Before making the drawer fronts, I made this pretty simple miter saw hood. Unlike the old hood, this one has no nooks and crannies where the dust will get stuck, and it's super easy to clean. I might put some more in the front to collect more of the dust, but I'm not sure what that would be yet, so for now I'm just gonna leave it like this and see how it works. So drawer fronts. I went for a cut out drawer handle, mostly to save money, but I also think it looks really good. There are, however, a few downsides to this type of handle. First off, there will be more dust in the drawers. Now that's not something that I worry about too much, because in my experience you will get dust in the drawers anyways, and I don't think it will make a huge difference, but we will see. Also, you open the drawers with the palms down, which is not the most comfortable, but again, this is just a free option. If you want to get proper drawer handles on your drawers, it doesn't have to be extremely expensive. When installing the fronts, I like to use some playing cards to get an even gap. Then I just use some brad nails to secure the fronts before adding some screws. I honestly can't believe that this plywood is only $15 to $20 per sheet. I think it looks really, really good. For the small drawers, I had to cut the handle through the drawer front, but also through the drawer frame. So instead of making every cut twice, I cut out these handles after installing the fronts. So some of them required some chisel work and quite a bit of sanding, but they turned out pretty good. I also added this edge banding around the bench top. This is a nice touch that makes the miter station look a whole lot better in my opinion. Of course you could use some hardware here, but I just went with plywood. Finally, I made some holes for the dust extractor hose and the power cord. Then I finished off with some Osmo top oil, and the miter station is done.
If you add up all of the expenses with the plywood, the hinges, screws, nails, and the finish, it ended up at a total of $484. That is for the entire miter station and a full can of the Osmo top oil. So please let me know what you think of this build in the comments, and remember, if you want to build this yourself, you can get the woodworking plans for this build on my website, baloni.com. So saving money on woodworking projects like this is great, but what's even better is making money with woodworking projects. A few months ago, I made a super simple product, and in my first month of selling it, I made $8,300. If you want to learn what that product is, how much profit I made, how I made it, and how you can make it as well, check out this video.